What are those?
Unnecessary engine parts.
Alright, welcome back to the second video in our series on K-swapping this Honda CR-Z. Last time we looked at disconnecting everything from the engine itself, taking off coolant hoses, shifter cables, disconnecting the exhaust, clutch line, all that stuff. In this video we're going to actually pull the engine block and transmission out completely. We're also going to look at disconnecting the rest of the IMA battery system and taking out the rest of the exhaust piping as well. Okay, so our engine and transmission is mounted in 3 spots. We've got this mount here on the passenger side, this mount on the driver's side, and underneath we have our third mount down at the bottom of the transmission. Those are the last 3 things that we need to unbolt, and then we're going to be able to jack this out. Here's the little mounting bracket for a hook or chain on the transmission side. And on the other side, we've threaded a bolt in right here, just past the last ignition coil, that will put the other end of our chain on, and that will be all we need to lift it out. Okay. Okay. There we go. Exhaust is out. Yeah, this tube is the only thing left.
Pair of pliers anywhere? Some big channel locks.
There we go. Alright.
Alright.
Okay, so with the engine lifted up a little bit, we got the rubber bushings out from right here, and now we have space to access the third bolt on the back side of this mount, so we can take all 3 of those out and remove this whole assembly to give us more clearance. To the computer.
I know homes will, if they made a paper manual for your car, even as a digital form, they'll print on demand for you for like $120 or something.
That's good to know.
I wanted to do an LS swap. That sounds like a lot of fun. Yeah. Although with most project cars, you end up doing that anyway. Just
let's
roll
get rolling. There we go.
I think we do.
Alright, there she is, engine gone. There's our exhaust, our transmission mount, which will also get pulled out and removed with a Hasport bracket, and we'll take this other bracket the rest of the way off too, because our kit completely replaces those. MD GPU too. Ryzen. Checks out.
Me when I buy an old Honda.
So removing the exhaust is similar to most other vehicles. You've just got these hangers and rubber bushings here that need to be pulled out. And for my project, again, we'll be discussing this in a future video more completely, but we're doing a complete exhaust from the engine all the way back. So we're going to be disconnecting and removing every section of this exhaust and taking it out for now. And these bolts, which are of course extremely rusty and will probably snap on you, all need to come out. Next up, we are going to pull the liner out of the trunk here and access our IMA battery system and get all of that along with the cooling ducts taken out so we can remove the cabling under the car. First up, we'll pull off this liner here. Get that out of the way. Alright. Editor's note from post-production here. While I was in the process of taking this battery out, I was pretty careless with a lot of the body panels. As you can see, the trunk is pretty dirty and screwed up, and a lot of the panels I just didn't care about. They already had some damage, so as I was bending and pushing them out of the way to access things, I did crack a couple of them and damage them more. So just make sure if you're removing the battery system that you're careful to pop those panels out all the way to get the clearance you need. It is important to note that you don't have to remove the IMA battery by any means. It's not going to hook up to the new drivetrain at all, but it's not going to hurt anything if you leave the battery pack and even the wiring there for whatever reason you decide to do. I'm going to show the removal process as best I can here, but again, if you choose not to remove it, that's okay. Here, let's see, we want to go set these over on the steps there by everything you guys. There's the spare. Now we also need to take off the plastic trim around the trunk area here, and it's mostly held in with clips. My subwoofer shroud right here is already broken off, so you'll have to remove that as well.
Sam pulls out an angle grinder and cuts a hole in your floorboard.
Say no more. Somebody left so much garbage in here.
I wonder who that was.
Okay, with most of this paneling pulled out of the way, we're going to take out the IMA fan back here and this tubing. After removing the two 10mm bolts right here, we can take this plate off, and inside is our switch to disable the hybrid battery system. You'll want to do that before we start taking this apart and unplugging the cables. Next up, we have a few bolts to remove the cover of the battery pack. We're going to take off this brace bar right here that stretches across the back end with these 12mm bolts, and this bar in the center, which has a few as well.
The other side of the bolt out here anywhere.
Alright. Okay, next up we've got these 4 arms on the battery pack, 2 on each side. We're going to remove more 12mm bolts to get those loose.
Trying to get.
I did end up having to remove this second vent on the other side as well to access that last bolt. Okay, now we got those 4 bolts out of the way. We still have a ground wire here on a 10mm bolt and this large harness here that we'll need to unplug.
New goats.
With the cover bent out of the way, we're going to keep going with these 10mm bolts. 1 more to go. Okay, there's 3 plastic pry tabs here that we can push in to lift up our cover. There's our 4 wire terminals. We'll take each of those out and then take off this plastic clip here so our IMA cable is free. Keeping the upstream one,
Yeah.
and deleting the middle one.
But I also know several people whose cats have suffered unfortunate accidents. during installation.
Disappeared under mysterious circumstances.
Yeah.
This needs to kind of stay here, so I'm just going to kind of lift it up from this side, and then we
Okay.
can slide it this way, I think.
Sounds good.
It should be fully unbolted and disconnected here.
So what do I have to avoid touching in order to
nothing.
not die?
Realistically,
Okay,
there's
nothing?
no charge in this battery.
Cool.
But we'll want to grab it from those 2 bars if you can reach them.
Yeah. Got it. Oh, big battery.
Is it hanging on something? Is that cable free?
It's free.
Yep. Okay, good.
Big batteries in your area.
High amperage batteries. So the last thing we have here is the IMA cables, which pass through the trunk here at this grommet. So once we get the exhaust and fuel tank area more accessible, we'll take out these 2 bolts and pass this the rest of the way through under the chassis. All right, Sam is still making headway on the exhaust. He's got the mid pipe out here, so I'm going to take apart, remove this heat shielding so we can access the shifter cable grommet and get those out of the way. All right, we're going live again, Sam.
Sam.
All right, after removing the 2 10mm bolts here and here on the heat shield, we're also going to disconnect this little mounting point for the vent hose here. And then our heat shield will come off and we can access the shifter cables. Okay, with the heat shield out of the way, here's the shifter cable grommet. We do have a couple more brackets. These are just a few more bolts to remove here to get access to that and pull it all the way out. All right, here's the bracket holding our shifter cables to the chassis. So we'll loosen these 2, and we'll have to take this one off eventually because I'm going to be replacing the actual cables with hybrid racing. But once that bracket's removed, we can pop this gasket out and push them through from the shifter. So for my K-swap, I'm also adding in a hybrid racing short shifter. We're replacing the OEM cables with hybrid racing as well, and we're using the 9th Gen Civic SI cables, at least as far as I know right now. As the project goes, I will of course let you know if I end up having to change that or modify anything to get the shifter to work correctly. So you might be wondering, if I bought an automatic CRZ, can I still K-swap it? And the answer in short is yes. You will of course need things like a shifter, shift cables, clutch system, all that type of stuff that you would typically have with a manual transmission that a CVT just won't. You'll also have to make sure that you have an engine and ECU that were originally paired with a manual transmission so that everything wires up correctly and functions. There is a guide on the CRZ forums that I actually use as a substantial part of my own research for this swap. And the person that did it did the swap on their Z and on their Fit, and they did an automatic to manual conversion. So they have a detailed section on what you need to do to convert to a manual. It's fairly straightforward as far as this whole swap project goes. So if that's something that's a part of your build, definitely check that info out. So as you can see here, I've got the factory cables all the way pulled out with their grommet, as well as the hybrid racing cables next to them here. The cables don't include this bracket and a new grommet, so we'll have to trim off the factory ones and reuse them. Alright, so here's the IMA cable coming from the engine bay. It does route underneath this plastic splash shield here, which does also cover over the fuel tank. So we'll pop out these plastic push rivets here, and we've got a couple more bolts as well to drop that panel off and access the rest of the cable. And then we will disconnect these brackets as well from the chassis and completely remove it. A bracket here and a bracket here holding the IMA cable to the frame. Now it does route underneath this portion of the frame as well. You can see I pulled this plastic splash shield down. We're going to try and unbolt this bracket right here and then disconnect it from the trunk and see if we have enough space to feed it through here without actually removing this brace at all. So here is our cable coming down here to the trunk access. This is going to be what we're going to remove with 10mm bolt there and there, and that should let us pop this out and start feeding it back under the chassis. Okay, so we took off this clip here. I did end up pulling this 14mm bolt for the brace to give us a little wiggle room. This cable is rigid, it's not actually that flexible, so we want to have some clearance to slide it out this direction, but we're just going to work on pulling it right out through the engine bay. Alright. Took quite a bit of finagling. You'll have to watch this bracket specifically as it's coming past the rear axle and brake lines, but we got it out. Alright, today was a long day. We got all the exhausts pulled out. Here's our hybrid battery ripped out. And of course, the cable and our old drivetrain, which next to this bad boy looks pretty pitiful. But this is, of course, up on a big riser as well. So the engine, everything's completely pulled out. Our engine bay is super open and easy to work in. In the next video, I'm going to look at specifically what we're going to do to fix up this engine and prepare it to be swapped in. That's not going to be as strict of a section of this guide for everybody because, of course, that's going to depend a lot on which engine and transmission you buy, if they come together or if you buy them separately, what you need to fix up on them, what you decide to add or rebuild to improve power. So the next one is going to be pretty specific to my particular engine and transmission choice, but I think it'll still be interesting to see how that goes. And once that's finished, she'll be about ready to drop in. So thank you for watching this part 2 of the CRZ K-Swap series. Really appreciate everybody following along with this project, and we'll see you in the next video.
Tools and parts laying all around. I got the hood up and the engine on the ground. Lowering the Honda up in the HP. Heart surgery with the K20Z3. Switching motors, tuning tight. Racing fast into the night.